This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Showtime, folks. It's episode 26 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor with you. Hank, welcome. How are you?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm feeling better. Allergies are still bothering me. I think you can tell my voice is a little bit better than the last show, but we soldier on. But I'm doing well as we now enter the home stretch of September. And now we're going to start getting really a lot of sports into the course of the conversation. In fact, I think we're going to get a little bit of everything into the course of the show today, which is what we want here on Game On. And I'm looking forward to that and seeing what's going to come up here. But a lot to get to. And of course, folks, we want to hear from you. So first and foremost, make sure to follow us across all social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/GameOnETB. We're on Twitter at GameOnETB. We're on Instagram at GameOn_ETB. Our personal handles are scrolling right there across the bottom of your screen. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB network, where you can get not only Game On, but Empty the Bench, Beyond the Bench, also our Monty Moments here, part of Game On with the college football picks, our Football Friday picks, which we'll have another one of those this upcoming Friday. And honestly, I can't wait to do that because I need to bounce back off of what was a very disappointing week against the spread last week. But that being said, Hank, I'm happier that the Giants are 2-0, and we're going to get to that. I'm looking forward to looking back at this week, which was just absolutely insane in so many different ways from top to bottom, which we'll get to. But like I said, we're going to get into a lot of stuff today. We've got the football. We've got basketball news, the latest with Robert Sarver. We've got baseball, we've got hockey, even we've got tennis. So much to get to over the course of the show. But let's kick things off with the NFL and look back at week 2. And I wonder, where the heck do we even start with this, because there's just so much that happened. But I think let's start in order here. And really, actually, when you look at the first game last Thursday night involving the Chiefs and the Chargers there at Arrowhead, and there's a lot to take from that, because the Chargers looked like they were going to come back, and the injury to Justin Herbert, which ended up, I think, being kind of pivotal, but it does not look like it's that serious. But the Chiefs do get a win there, 27-24, and a matchup of probably, you have to say, the two favorites in the AFC West for sure. So the Chargers get away with that. Of course, we both picked the Chiefs, and they did not cover. So we were already off to a bad start in that regard. But then you get to Sunday, and oh my gosh, I mean, the first two games that we're going to talk about here, the first two games that we picked, and that was Dolphins-Ravens and Jets-Browns. Now, first and foremost, this Dolphin-Raven game was absolutely incredible. It really all started with the 103-yard kickoff return for a touchdown by the Ravens, and it looked like they were just going to take off. I mean, they had 28-7 lead. They had a 35-14 lead. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here come the Dolphins. And really, when you look at it, and Tua Tagovailoa was going to have to play a near perfect game. And you know what? He was 25-30. He threw for 6 touchdowns. I mean, the Dolphins, I think, really proved that, they are going to be one of the teams to compete for at least at the bare minimum, a wild card spot here in the AFC.
Yeah, I don't know if they're a better team than, say, the Buffalo Bills in that division, but I think the Dolphins showed that they are a different team. I think I had a feeling Tua was going to be able to thrive more under a more offensive-minded coach. And then, not to mention, they complemented him with acquisitions such as Tyreek Hill during the offseason. I think I'm not surprised that they had this comeback, even though I actually had the Baltimore Ravens in our little picks thing. But Yeah, Dolphins are definitely going to be making some noise. That being said, I think this week is going to be a major litmus test for them in the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and just to go to Tua for a second. Now, 25 of 30, his numbers look nearly perfect. So I went back and I watched that game on the highlights again on Monday. And what I noticed really was not only the defense from the Ravens, but Tua's throws were, for the most part, I mean, some of them were good, but some of the deep throws too, if you look at it, and this just I think also speaks to how bad the Ravens were in that fourth quarter. He actually, in one of the touchdowns, I think it was to Tyreek, it was kind of underthrown. If you looked at Hill had to wait for the ball to get to him. He actually had to pause when he was running his route, and he had to stop and wait for the ball, and he was able to. But I think, like you said, the Hill acquisition I loved for the Dolphins, because what that does now is if you're going to double team Hill, then that's going to leave his teammate from Alabama, Jalen Waddle, wide open. And Waddle had a great game. Hill had a great game. The defense stepped up late. It really was an unbelievable comeback. And as far as the Ravens go, Lamar Jackson was great, but their defense faded down the stretch. They were very undisciplined in certain parts in this game. But yeah, that's why I think you're seeing the question marks with Tua, I think, are still there, but you're seeing Mike McDaniel was such a great hire for them, because they were talking about either McDaniel or possibly even Sean Payton going to the Dolphins. And McDaniel looks like somebody now that can coach that team for the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, he's got that team in all strides. It really was incredible. And speaking to how great that fourth quarter was, Tua joined. I mean, listen to some of these names. These were, in NFL history, 5 quarterbacks who threw the most touchdown passes in the fourth quarter of a game in NFL history. And they all were 4. And it was Tua, Sage Rosenfels with the Texans in 2007, Vinny Testaverde with the Jets in 2000, Joe Montana with the 49ers in 1989, and Ken Stabler back in 1980. So Tua joining a list with Montana and Stabler is absolutely remarkable. And yeah, now it sets up a thrilling AFC East showdown next week with the Buffalo Bills. But yeah, that was just the start of what was a crazy, crazy day in the NFL. And then you get to the Jets and the Browns, and wow, I mean, I don't even know what to say. Either same old Jets or same old Browns. One trumps the other, and it sure did in this case. But Browns up 30-17 with a minute 55 to go, and the Jets are able to score a touchdown quick, recover an onside kick, and go down and score again. And you know what? Let's give them credit. Joe Flacco, who by accident had to be better than he was last week. He didn't have to throw the ball 59 times, and that's why I felt like he was going to have a chance in this one. But, I mean, this was an incredible effort for the Jets and an unbelievable comeback win.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Then the onside kick too, that's now become even harder to pull off with the new NFL rules. And let's be honest, the Cleveland Browns, they should have put that game away. Like, they had their chance earlier. I forgot what it was, but Nick mentioned there was a play that they had, but then had they gotten that first down, the clock would have kept on running, and the Jets would have probably had no shot at coming back if it goes the other way. But yeah, absolutely crazy game. And hey, you want to hear a fun fact? The Giants, Jets, the Mets, and the Yankees all won on the same day for the first time since September 27th, 2009.
I mean, I think that goes to show you where New York sports have been in the last 15 or so years, that all 4 of those teams won on the same day. I mean, they've all had their stretches over that period that have not been great. Even the Yankees, for their standards, have not been up there as well. But yeah, I mean, that was incredible. All 4 of them won on the same day for the first time since 2009, like you said. But even some more historical numbers coming out of this Jets win. In previous games where NFL teams were trailing by 13 plus points in the final 2 minutes, including overtime, teams had lost 2,331 consecutive games in that instance. And the Jets had lost 39 straight games when trailing by at least 13 points at any point. I talked about this when we did the picks last week. They had a 13-game losing streak going in September going into that matchup against the Browns. And Joe Flacco picked up his first win as a starter since 2019. Now, I mean, I think you got to be thrilled as a Jet fan. I mean, look, even on the Browns side, though, as much as that collapse was, Jacoby Brissett actually played pretty well. Their running back tandem that they've got with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb's been outstanding so far, and I think that's going to be a big deal when we get to looking at their Thursday night game coming up here to kick off week 3. But the Jets needed this in the worst way. There were teams that were desperate going into week 2. There's always are, but I think the Jets were one of them, especially coming off of what Robert Saleh's comments were last week about the receipts. But look, you give them credit for the unbelievable comeback, and you wonder now, can they build off of this when they take on the Bengals at home? I mean, I think they're getting the Bengals at a great time, and Zach Wilson still a couple of weeks away from returning, so Flacco's going to be back under there to start on Sunday. But an unbelievable win all the way around for the Jets after it looked like for the longest time that it wasn't going to happen. You saw some things, but I liked some things that I saw from the Jets side too, besides Flacco. Garrett Wilson, their first-round pick at wide receiver, has been great. Already looked like he's going to shape up to be a very good player in this league. Another reason why I love what the Jets have done in the offseason, building this up slowly. That's why I said I think the Jets are too talented to have too few wins this year. It's the same thing along with the Giants. I think the Giants have, in different ways, I think they're going to be too good to have a pretty bad record. But a great win for the Jets. We'll see if they build off of that when they take on the Bengals on Sunday there in week number 3. Lions got past the Commanders, one of our few picks that we both got right, with the Lions winning 36-27. And the Lions are showing, they jumped out to a huge lead, 22-0 at one point, and they're showing you, they're an improved team this year. Absolutely. And the Commanders, who had a chance to kind of make a statement in the NFC East to possibly go 2-0, even though let's be honest, they probably should not have won the game against Jacksonville, but a win is a win. But they had a chance to make a bold statement here to go to 2-0. But Lions win 36-27. And I said I think the Lions are an improved team. Another team that's an improved team, Hank, to me, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And look what they do. They go down there 24-0 against the Colts. And all of a sudden now, I mean, you look at it, that were worst division. And this was something I talked about in the going into the regular season.
That was a game they needed too, because look who they have on their schedule the next 2 weeks. They have the Chargers and the Eagles.
Yeah, it's a big win for Jacksonville, and all of it. And what it really does is now all of that AFC South, which I said in our NFL preview show that we did 2-3 weeks ago, is the worst division in the NFL. And now all of a sudden, Jacksonville's got a little bit of life into it. When you look at who else you have right now, you have the Colts, who are 0-1-1, really should be 0-2. I mean, that tie was really ridiculous. Yeah. But nevertheless, they're 0-1-1. The Titans are now 0-2 and don't look good at all. And the Texans, you know what? They've showed you a little something here in these first 2 weeks, but now the Jaguars got a little bit of life. And, Lawrence looked pretty good. They're an improved, look, there's still going to be some growing pains. They played well enough to win the first game against Washington, but they're a little bit of an improved team. And you know what? When you've got another year under Lawrence under his belt, and you've got actually a coach who can stabilize things there in Doug Peterson, can make a difference. So now the AFC South becomes very, very interesting. So Jaguars win 24-0, and all of a sudden now I think one of the coaches that are on the hot seat in the early going here, Hank, is Frank Reich over there in Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah, no, the Colts, it's funny. We thought that they would be a team that looked to be improved, but so far, based on what I'm seeing early on in the season, it's looking like that assessment is very off, because for one thing, Matt Ryan looks like he's seen better days, and gosh, this is like what, the fourth different quarterback the Colts have had in the matter of a few years. Like, that's pretty sad. Probably even more than that too. And not to mention their offensive line hasn't really helped matters, and Jonathan Taylor really killed me in fantasy not having a great game, and really hoping this isn't a trend among the Colts this year. But Yeah, so far, I think that team is in really rough shape. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the end of the Frank Reich era in the Colts. Although, to be honest with you, I don't really blame him so much as I blame Chris Ballard. I think he's made some good moves that like helped improve them like at the beginning, but if you look at a lot of his later moves over the past few years, they have not really helped.
Jonathan Taylor only had 54 yards rushing on Sunday, and Michael Pittman, who was actually one of their better wide receivers, was not active on Sunday. He was dealing with an injury, so that I think hurt them too. But in that division, where I'll tell you right now, you look at it, you're looking at maybe a team winning 7 to 9 games, and that could be good enough to win that South. It's not that strong of a division. And I had picked the Colts to win it, and it was really not even because of them. I think it was more because I was not in love with what the Titans had done in the offseason. I think it's still possible. Now, unfortunately for the Colts, they take on the Chiefs next week. Now they are home to face the Chiefs, but Kansas City, who can put up some points going into that building, the way that the Colts have looked on offense so far, I mean, they're going to need some help. Now, defensively, we know the Chiefs have their struggles, but I mean, that's a very tough spot, when you're desperate for a win and you're going up against a Patrick Mahomes-led offense there with the Chiefs. I think that's a very, very tough spot to go into in a team that's going to be very, very desperate going into next week. But the Jaguars win, and they've looked pretty good so far through the first 2 weeks as well. The Buccaneers get past the Saints 20-10 in, wow, a lot to discuss with this one. First off, Bucs numerous injuries on their end and really did not do much on offense for about 3/4 of this game. You saw Tom Brady throw down the tablet in frustration. We saw Mike Evans and Marcus Lattimore get into it again in this one. And all of a sudden, but in the end, though, Brady was able to get some offense going late third into early fourth quarter, and the Bucs were able to take off and win 20-10. And all of a sudden, a needed win there for the Bucs because with all the injuries they've got right now, and of course, their offensive line, which is still a question mark, a pretty big win there, and for Brady to get over the hump of not being able to beat the Saints, I think is a very, very big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And good that they finally got a regular season win at the Superdome for once, but also Jameis Winston didn't really have a great game either. So that's another thing that's got to factor. The Bucs, in my opinion, they're still a pretty strong team, although I think they're a little bit weaker, but they did make a nice little under the radar move with the signing of Cole Beasley. I think that'll definitely help them. It gives Brady another weapon to have on as part of his set of wide receivers. And then obviously, we got to talk about our beloved New York Giants. I mean, look,
can I get to one thing?
Ugly? Absolutely.
Can I get to one final thing though? I'm
sorry. Sure, go for it.
One final thing on the Saints, and then obviously I want to dive into the Giant game because there's a narrative out there that we have to correct in a very, very big way. And I know I can't wait for when you guys talk about it on your show on Thursday. But as far as this, just to wrap up this Bucs Saints game for a second, the news from Jay Glazer that comes out an hour before the kickoff that Winston's playing with 4 fractures in his back. Now, I don't know if Winston's trying to be a hero in this spot, but you don't need Jameis Winston to win games. We've seen that down there in New Orleans. Taysom Hill is a versatile, mobile quarterback who I know doesn't have kind of the arm strength that Winston has, but he has the ability with that team to go out there and win some games. And when you looked at the Saints early in their first week, Michael Thomas looked like he was back. Jarvis Landry is giving you something. I mean, you had players on that team produce, and I know they had to come back from a big deficit against the Falcons, but you know what? You had a chance there to make a bold statement in that game, and I think Winston's trying to be too much of a hero. He looked very, very human, and unfortunately looked like the Winston of his days back in Tampa Bay. If that back's going to be a problem this year, don't be a hero. You know what? Saints have the ability. They could possibly sneak in and maybe contend for a wild card spot. Now, I don't know that's going to be the case because they are a very tough team to figure out. But if this back problem is going to be significant throughout, then if you're the Saints, I mean, you can't chance that. You know what? it's going to affect his ability. I still would rather take the chances with Taysom Hill, who showed you that he's had some moments this year, in the past, I should say, and run with that. But yeah, that news that came out, and then he looked just totally off. And you give credit to the Bucs because the Bucs defense has been suffocating so far these first 2 weeks. Putting up 3 points against the Cowboys and really holding the Bucs in check, the Saints in check there on Sunday. Pretty remarkable as well. And yeah, let's get to the Panther-Giant game from Sunday because, I think if you're the Giants, I think there's a lot to take out of this game you've got to like. First off, number one, special teams to me had a great day. It started really on the opening kickoff with that fumble recovery. Graham Gano kicking, fantastic. It's not often that you get to talk about the Giants special teams as being a positive, but that would be takeaway number one. Now, Hank, I know you had some other stuff to say, and then I'll come back on my end. But I think special teams was great. I think defense was great. I think the offense was actually not bad either, even though they only put up 19 points. You would have liked to see them put up more in those first 2 turnovers. But I think there's a lot that you have to like from the Giants on Sunday.
Yeah, I think besides the special teams, I would say the defense has been a huge factor in this win. And a big thank you goes to Wink Martindale. And let me give you some fun facts. The Giants right now have the number 1 third down defense in the NFL. It's at a 21.7% conversion rate through 2 weeks. So right away, that's a lot better than what we had been seeing the past few years. And some guys who had some pretty big performances. Dexter Lawrence had 4 pressures. He had a big quarterback hit, and he also made a big stop on Christian McCaffrey that really could have changed the game. And look, despite the fact that Christian McCaffrey had 102 yards, 49 of them were on 1 carry. So if you really look at it, all things considered, the Giants have been doing a pretty good job at shutting down the running games over the course of this season. And it'll be interesting to see how they do against the Cowboys once they have Ezekiel Elliott. And, I think other guys who did well, O'Shane Ximines, first sack since 2019. And then Giad Ward, he had another good game. And again, if you look at a lot of these names on the defense, they're not names that you would expect to see from like one that's powerhouse, but that really goes to show you coaching has been huge for the New York Giants, and Wink Martindale has been absolutely great. Now, obviously, the one scare was Leonard Williams going down with the knee injury. It looked like it was minor. It doesn't look like he's going to be playing against the Cowboys, but that compared to what we probably thought could have been the case, that's probably one of the more better case scenarios. And then obviously another unsung hero was Dane Belton. He had that fumble recovery at the beginning of the game that was with Coughlin stripping the ball away. And then he also had 5 tackles. So again, I'm giving you a lot of different names of guys that have been contributing. And mind you, this is with a secondary that's literally paper thin. I mean, really the only reliable cornerback we have at this point is Adoree Jackson, especially since Cordell Flott ended up getting burnt after that touchdown at the beginning. But, and then you look at the offense, again, it's not like a relatively strong roster, but even though Barkley didn't have quite as many yards as he did against the Titans, he got big ones when it mattered the most. And, I think we also have to talk about the elephant in the room and Daniel Jones. I mean, realistically, he only had one good drive, but on that one drive, he made some really good passes, especially that last one to Daniel Bellinger, who, by the way, that touchdown catch was his first ever catch in the NFL. So definitely great to see. And Andrew Thomas continues to be a pillar for the offensive line. I mean, he's been the highest graded offensive lineman based on PFF over the first few weeks. He has not allowed a sack yet, nor a quarterback hit, and only one cute quarterback hurry. He has been good. And while Evan Neal had moments where he struggled, he did give up his first sack. I think he definitely improved over the course of the game. And yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to like about the Giants. And even though they made some mistakes, like for a good amount for a good portion of the game, especially not being able to score that touchdown after that turnover right at the beginning, I think for the most part, the Giants really looked like the better team. And hey, Graham Gano, he has been absolute money. The guy does not miss 2 50-plus yard field goals to help the Giants win. And again, you're gonna see some of the ups and downs again. It's fair to say the Giants still are in a learning experience, but you have to like that they're 2-0 through all these learning curves. And listen, they did this without Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yep, I was just gonna say that if you look at so they're doing this without those two guys, and then Leonard Williams, who got hurt, and it looks like it was best case scenario, considering what it looked like at first. But yeah, first off, Wink Martindale's got to get a lot of credit, not just because of the name, but because of what he's been able to do. I love the signing of when they brought in Martindale, because what he's able to do is do something that the Giants defense has not done for years with blitzes and stuff. So I love that. And the names and the talent that are on this team for what they are able to do, considering who they have, I think is pretty remarkable. I mean, it's kind of elite stuff when you think about it. And like you said, Christian McCaffrey had one great run, but his numbers look great. But specifically, really, if you look at the whole game film, I mean, it was one great run, and then he really didn't do much afterwards. But the Giants defense, and I think you had brought this up, third down, they're the best in the NFL on defense in third down conversion rate against, lowest completion percentage against. They're doing this without their top two pass rushers, one game without with a cornerback. I think it's great. You know what? And offensively, still a work in progress. Again, Daniel Jones, he had some moments that just made you want to go crazy, but he also had moments that looked really, really good. And I think you have to be fair on that. You have to give him credit in that regard. And I think the coaching staff's done a tremendous job and has to be, given credit. And at the end of the day, considering the talent level that they have on both sides of the ball, they're 2-0. And, the notion that's out there that the Giants should not be 2-0, they are lucky to be 2-0, they're the worst 2-0 team. Guys, that is a bunch of crap, all right? I mean, they were the better team. Maybe not. They were the better team on Sunday. If you watch that whole entire game. And again, there were moments that, yes, were not perfect, but they were the better team in the second half against the Titans, and they were the better team for the majority of this game last Sunday against the Panthers. So to tell me that they're lucky or they're the worst 2-0 team, you know what? I'll take 10 wins like we've had these first 2 weeks and get me to 10-7 and get into the playoffs. Because you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you do it. A win is a win. So give me, a great job by Wink Martindale on defensively, to Brian Daboll as the head coach, because you're definitely seeing a difference here with the coach. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, you've seen that he's gotten frustrated at times. He's showing some emotion, and I think that's because he cares. He reminds me, at least on the emotion side, of Tom Coughlin. Now, again, I'm not saying that he is Tom Coughlin, but I mean, it is really incredible to see the 180 in the first 2 weeks that this team has done. Now, again, I'm not telling you that this team's going to run and win 10 games. I'm not telling you that this team's going to be a playoff team, because they're going to have some sneaky games coming up here in these next couple of weeks. All of a sudden now, this Cowboy game, I'd like to be confident in, but it's a divisional matchup. The Cowboys always get up for it. And in a couple of weeks, they have to travel to Seattle. And the Seahawks, who I know are not going to be one of the better teams in the league, always are tough to play at home. And so there's going to be some moments this year, but hey, 2-0 is 2-0. I don't care if it's 9-6, if Jones only throws for 100 yards. If you actually, the people that are telling me that they're lucky did not, I'll be honest with you, the people that are telling me that they are lucky or they're the worst 2-0 team did not watch the game on Sunday.
No.
That's what it is, because there were moments. Let's be honest, I'll tell you right now, Daniel Jones was the better quarterback Sunday. Baker Mayfield looked awful. And he's one that, and the Panthers have more talent than the Giants. That's why I thought they were actually going to win. But Mayfield looked awful. They did not really get much out of one run, but McCaffrey. Moore really didn't do much. Robbie Anderson really didn't do much. The Giants were the better team all the way around. And again, a win is a win. We'll take it. We'll move on here. See if we can build on it against the Cowboys on Monday. But there was a lot that I liked on Sunday, and I'm not going to apologize for being 2-0.
And you shouldn't. You shouldn't, especially with what we've dealt with for so long after that last Super Bowl. You should never apologize for being 2-0.
The Giants have been arguably one of the worst teams in football, if not the worst team, since the Super Bowl run. I mean, they've had that one playoff run, and then they lost to the Packers. But these last several years, they've been one of, if not the worst team in football. And they've, or at least are showing you signs, considering the stuff that they have on offense. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, look at the receiving core and stuff. I mean, Sills is probably their best wide receiver right now. I mean, he's had a lot of the touches. I mean, it's been remarkable.
Here's another thing I want to mention, by the way. So think about this. You're seeing guys like Richie James, David Sills, and what's the other one's name? What's that other receiver? I'm blanking on it.
Well, what's your
and
point,
guys like
Bob?
Sterling Shepard?
Sterling Shepard, who's been great since he's come back off the Achilles. Yep.
You're seeing those guys get opportunities. And then you look at Kenny Galladay by contrast. He was only there for like 2 moments, and then he got benched. And if you look at what's been going on with Kenny Galladay, like, I'm pretty sure this is an example of Giants coaching, like, holding their players accountable. And I have to tell you, that is not something we saw enough over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Brian Dable's not fooling around, guys.
Accountability, absolutely. I mean, you even saw it in the first, like we talked about on the show last week, with Daniel Jones, who threw that terrible interception in the end zone to Barkley last week. You saw,
and you know what? Dable did it again. Like when Daniel Jones had a few mistakes, he was not afraid to chew him out. And you know what? For the second week in a row, he led them to win.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. You know what? Daniel Jones has stepped up in these 2 games when they needed him the most. He has been there. Now, he's still making mistakes that he should not be making in year 4. There's no doubt about it. But when they need him the most, he has been there. Whether it's been with the run, whether it's been with the throw. I mean, he is like that roller coaster ride, Hank. But you know what? When they needed him the most, he has been there, and there's no doubt about that. The numbers may not be pretty, but again, if you go straight by numbers, and you have to watch this game, you have to dig down and watch this game deep, because there were definitely a lot of moments that specifically were good. And we'll see if that carries over into the Cowboy game on Monday night. But look, 2-0, I wasn't expecting 2-0 out of the game. That's for sure. And 2-0 and a lot of positives to start this year. And yeah, I mean, again, with Dable starting under Dable as coach, definitely seeing a difference already, for sure. So Giants are 2-0, and that was a pretty remarkable game, all told, being able to win 19-16. An ugly one, another low-scoring game, which was kind of ugly to watch to wrap up the early window. Patriots and Steelers, Pats winning 17-14. And Hank, I mean, I had said it last week, if Trubisky could play a turnover-free, near-perfect game, the Steelers were going to win. Well, he did not do that. They did not muster much at all. Patriots, I don't feel like were that much better, but they were able to pull this one out 17-14. And now all of a sudden the discussion once again is talking about Kenny Pickett down there in Pittsburgh. And I think this game coming up on Thursday for them is going to be very, very critical in that regard. But Patriots win 17-14.
Oh, yeah, I think you absolutely have to start Kenny Pickett eventually, because, I mean, look, the only reason you even brought Mitch Trubisky on board was to use him as like a bridge or a backup in between Pickett and Big Ben. And if Mitch really is going to continue to hold them back, I think you have to put Pickett in sooner. And you look at how he did during preseason. I don't see, frankly, I don't see how he's even on the bench at this point at all. I clearly think he's the better option.
I think he is, but I also don't know they're going to rush into him right away and on a short week here against the Browns. I don't think this is a great matchup for Pickett to start on Thursday. But it's going to be it's going to eventually happen. Now, for the most part, the Steelers defense wasn't that bad, but T.J. Watt though was clearly missed in this game on Sunday, and also not being able to really get a lot of pressure to Mac Jones, another big deal too. And we'll find out. I mean, they're going to have to play probably another low-scoring, ugly game on Thursday. But Pats win to go to 1-1. Steelers fall to 1-1, and that closed out the early window. Late window was full of games that we thought were going to be blowouts or kind of ugly, and for the most part, they actually didn't turn out that way. Rams got past the Falcons 31-27, but the Rams were the dominant team for most of it, but the Falcons made a late rally. One thing I did notice early on for the Rams is they did get Allen Robinson more involved. He had 2 targets on their opening drive after being really only targeted only a couple of times in the entire first game against Buffalo. Good a bounce back win for the Rams, but at the same time, you had such a big lead and you allowed the Falcons to come back. I mean, it was 28-3 at one point, and the Falcons came back and made this game.
Oh gosh, that score again.
But they were on the other side of it, and they made it a game. Yeah, 28-3 leads, no matter who it is, no matter when it is, they're not safe.
It's like in hockey how they have the dreaded 2-goal lead. We might have to call it the dreaded 28-3 lead.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But Rams win 31-27. Of course, we both took the Rams -10, and we looked good there for a while. But nope, it was one of those weeks. When you look at these slate of games and you look at what happens, and you wonder why, Hank went 6-11, 6-10, and I went 5-11. This was one of them. So the Rams win 31-27. I think the biggest deal out of one of the biggest deals, but one of the big notes of this week in general, the 49ers get past the Seahawks 27-7, but obviously all the talk in this game is about Trey Lance and the broken ankle that he suffered very, very early on. Did not look good. Already had surgery. He's going to be out for the season. And you know what? John Lynch and because is really now he goes from being an idiot. Kyle Shanahan, thank you. That's what I was trying to think of. They both go from being idiots to really being geniuses when you look at it, about the whole Jimmy Garoppolo situation. And I'm going to try and say this without being, too cruel. But as far as, my pick in this one, when Lance went out, I knew I was dead. Because Garoppolo stepped in. He was fantastic. Geno Smith came back to reality in a big way. They were not able to contain the 49er offense despite their injuries that they had. But we hope that Lance is going to be all right, because that's a very, very unfortunate situation. But now Garoppolo steps in, and, now the 49ers will see what they could do now with Jimmy G in charge. But they easily take care of the Seahawks 27-7.
And then, I think I think the Niners, it was more luck that they were able to keep him around, and sign him to that contract, because ordinarily if Lance had been playing that whole season, you'd probably look at it like, why is he still on this roster? But now it's going to lead to some more question marks for the 49ers if they can sustain their level of play over the course of the season, and especially if they make a deep run, because Jimmy G's led them to the NFC Championship multiple times, but that's something that obviously they'll think about after the season. You had the Dallas Cowboys finding a way to beat the Bengals despite the fact that Joe Burrow led them to a tie game, and despite the fact that they were without Dak Prescott. And, I got to say, this was surprising in the sense that you weren't expecting a depleted Cowboys team without their starting quarterback to get a win. But now, I think as a Giants fan, you go into next week, that game looks a lot harder because Cooper Rush has that win. And granted, and to be honest, this is something I probably would have said even if the Cowboys had lost that game. That defense is scary, especially with Micah Parsons,
I mean, Micah Parsons is really shaping up to maybe be the most dominant player in the league right now. He's got 4 sacks already. He's got 17 and 18 career games. Mm-hmm. That is something to watch going into Monday for sure. They got Diggs as well. I know they're still lacking a lot, that team, but they jumped out to a quick 17-3 lead. Now, they did allow the Bengals to come back and tie this game, and it took a late field goal to win it. But, yeah, the defensively, I mean, they are for real. And let me say this, Hank, through 2 weeks, the most disappointing team and maybe the most disappointing part of any team so far this early season is the Bengals offensive line. I mean, it is amazing because we thought they shored it up in the offseason. It was a big need going into this year, and it's just been terrible these first 2 weeks. There's no doubt about it. Now, they've had still some chances to win both games, but that offensive line, not being able to protect Burrow these first 2 weeks has been a major disappointment. And now all of a sudden, now they are 0-2, and they're going to take on a Jet team, which I think actually, can make things interesting against them next week. They right now are in desperation mode to me. But yeah, that's the thing I would take out of that game. And after the first 2 weeks, the most disappointing team to me is the Bengals. And the most disappointing part is really that Bengals offensive line. It's been that bad so far. But
yeah, I would agree. It's definitely been a very weak spot, and it shows you with Burrow getting sacked a lot.
But you know what? Cooper Rush 2. I mean, I'm sorry, not Cooper. Cooper Rush 2-0 as a starter. I think though it's totally different though. It's one thing to be playing at home there at AT&T Stadium, especially when you're playing that late window where you have the sun coming through, which can definitely play a role. It's another thing now you're going to play on Monday Night Football next week at MetLife Stadium with the Giants fan base that is really energized, starting 2-0. You're going to have what you're going to have to do, and I know we're going to talk about this more in our football picks, which are going to drop Friday at 7:00 Eastern, is really contain the ball. And what I mean by that is you got to sustain long drives and wear out that defense if you're the Cowboys, and they could possibly do that because there have been some moments. But the Giants on third down this year have been very, very good. So we'll see. But I think that's the key for Rush. But he's definitely going. It's a much different situation when you have to travel now in a divisional matchup on Monday Night Football against a rejuvenated fan base and team in the New York Football Giants. But a good win for the Cowboys to keep their hopes alive because, falling to 0-2 and then having to take on the Giants, the Eagles, and the Rams. I mean, it could have been really over. And I still think they're done, but they at least extended for a few more weeks there down there in Big D. But, yeah, they get the win there. Texans keep it close against the Broncos, but the Broncos win 16-9 just to prove the kind of week that I had with my picks. This was actually one that I got right, and that was Houston getting 10, and they were able to keep it close. But, boy, I'll tell you, if you're the Broncos, even though you win this game, once again, Nathaniel Hackett, the story of the
oh my gosh.
They
won. I was going to say they won that game in spite of him, not because of him.
Yeah, I mean, how about that moment that you got to call timeout because you don't have a return punter on the field? I mean, it was that bad.
Oh my gosh.
There. It's a question mark with a lot of teams this year. First-year coaches, first-year new coaches, and it's one thing, when you're a coordinator over there in Green Bay, but now to do it a mile high there in Denver with a team that's expected to do well, but you are able to get the win and bounce back, and now you're 1-1, but kind of an ugly one in that regard too. And you know what? I'll say this: the Texans and even for the Falcons too, the two teams that I put at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of teams this year, they've at least showed you some life here in these first 2 weeks. They actually may not be as bad as we originally predicted, but nevertheless, the good bounce back there maybe not good, but a bounce back win for the Denver Broncos. And then, again, this was just a sign of how bad this week was for picks. The Arizona Cardinals and the Las Vegas Raiders. It's 20-0 in the third quarter. And then the Raiders just absolutely fall apart late in this one.
Yeah, that was definitely a great comeback by the Cardinals. And I have 2 words to really describe that comeback. Kyler Murray. And let's be real, he probably could have single-handedly saved their season with those touchdowns that he had. And how about that crazy 2-point conversion where they just could not tackle him? Like, absolutely unreal. And then to have that game end with, what was it, the fumble recovery for a touchdown?
Yep.
Unreal. And then I think their season's pretty much saved. He probably saved the GM and the head coach's job too with that comeback.
Yeah, because that's another guy, Cliff Kingsbury, we would have been talking about here on the show if the Cardinals had lost. And Kyler can only do so much. And look at everything that he's done in these first 2 weeks. And he did will them back from a 20-0 deficit. That's got to be absolutely deflating, demoralizing if you're the Raiders to be up that big and even having that lead late, and then the fumble recovery for the touchdown at the end of overtime there. That could be absolutely deflating. And again, it's difficult to see how all four of these teams in the AFC West can be that good, but somebody's going to have a disappointing year. I don't know if it's going to be the Raiders, but this is the kind of loss. I mean, it eats at you for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And the Raiders are definitely one of those teams that I think is behind the 8 ball. And yeah, I think now you're going to start to hear questions about whether Josh McDaniels is the right guy, especially after how his tenure with the Denver Broncos went years ago, with it being his first time there in a long time.
Next week will be, I think, the golden chance for them, because they do travel to Tennessee to take on an 0-2 Titans team that just can't score either. And we're going to talk about the West Coast to East Coast travel, but you know what? That's a game you've got to have if you're the Raiders. Otherwise, you go to 0-3 in that division. Pretty much your season's over. But we'll make a pick on that one next week. But that's something to watch. So they travel cross country, take on the Titans, who also are having problems right now. But yeah, really, next week's the Raiders' season. That's what it is. You can't go to 0-3 in this division unless you're going to win all your divisional matchups. But yeah, it's that's the situation you run into. Another thing too with this division is you can't afford to lose games like that. Very few teams. I mean, maybe you want to tell me the Chiefs, maybe you want to tell me the Chargers could, but everybody else, you cannot really afford to do that in what is supposed to be a loaded division there. But we'll find out. Next week's going to make or break their season for sure over there in Vegas. Really, the last 3 games of the week, Hank, there's really not much to describe because they were really all one-sided. The Packers get past the Bears like we thought they would, 27-10. The Bills destroyed the Titans 41-7. Again, how did the Titans even put up that kind of points, especially when you go up against that defense? It's just an ugly, awful matchup, as you could expect, and it was. And the Eagles, the Eagles make a bold statement here with a win against the Vikings, and Jalen Hurts all of a sudden now is going to be talked about as a possible MVP because he really was outstanding on Monday Night Football. And Hurts, to me, he plays like this. I mean, he's definitely going to be in the conversation for MVP.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The Buffalo Bills, it's amazing. We're already 2 weeks into the season and they are running roughshod over their competition. I think they are clearly a team on a mission, and I don't know whether this game had more to do with the fact that the Bills are just so overpowering or the fact that the Titans have just gotten significantly weaker over the course of the offseason. I'm willing to go with both, to be honest with you, because I feel like if you talk about how bad the Titans were, like in that blowout loss, I don't think it really does justice how powerful the Buffalo Bills are. I mean, oh my gosh, that touchdown combo of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs is just going to give so many teams nightmares. And gosh, why couldn't they just flex over that Bills-Dolphins game?
Well, it's funny because, and we'll talk about this on Friday, but it's amazing how that's probably the best game on the CBS slate, and you don't have your A team going there for it. But to really answer that question more, the Titans to me are not a good team.
No.
They did not shore up the offensive line. They have nothing really much they don't have much on offense at all. And when you don't have a bad offensive line and you have a power running back, I mean, it's a bad combination. It's going to be tough to score there in Tennessee. And now they've only put up 27 points in 2 games. It's not going to get it done. And I'll tell you, I don't like them going up against the Raiders, with Max Crosby on defense. I mean, that that's not a good matchup. And I don't care that the Raiders are traveling cross country. You know what? They're the better team. So I think it's only going to continue. The only thing, the benefit that the Titans have is they're in the worst division in the NFL right now. Because, Hank, let's be honest. 2 weeks in, the best team in the AFC South is the Jaguars. They're the ones that have played 2 complete games so far. I mean, you really could make the case that they should be 2-0 because they should have beat the Commanders in week 1.
Oh, and by the way, I'm flirting with the idea of, possibly taking them to upset. Whether I do or not, you'll have to find that out.
Yes, and that is a good way to transition because we will make our full Football Friday picks against the spread on Friday, and it drops every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Of course, folks, you have to take it with a grain of salt because last week I went 5-11, Hank went 6-10, but you know what? We had a bad week, but the great thing is we get to turn right back around and do it all again and try and rebound because you know what, Hank? We're coming up on week 3. Yes, it is already. And tell you this year, it's going to fly by. It does every year, and no exception this year. As we already get you set for week 3, which will happen on Thursday night on Amazon Prime. It's an AFC North showdown. Pittsburgh Steelers travel to the Browns there in Cleveland. You'll see Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit, Kaylee Hartog on the call here on Amazon Prime, and this is crazy. So the Browns, this line opened up with the Browns favored by 3.5, and it has now jumped to 5.5 in a matchup that just screams Mitchell Trubisky versus Jacoby Brissett. And you know it's scary when you almost have more confidence in Jacoby Brissett than Mitch Trubisky. But Hank, when you look at this matchup, what do you think, and what's your prediction here for week 3?
5.5 as a spread is a little high, all things considered, because, the Browns are still without Watson. But defensively, this game is going to be an absolute bloodbath. I mean, I obviously would lean towards the Browns in terms of winning that game, but I am going to go against the 5.5 point spread. I'm taking Steelers.
All right, so you're going to take the Steelers to cover here. See, here's the thing I would look at. The Steelers have only had 2 offensive touchdowns so far in the first 2 weeks of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I look at it, offensive line looked better, but, Najee Harris did not look 100% on Sunday against New England. And I always have to worry about the boneheaded mistake that Mitch Trubisky can have here. And if you're the Browns, you don't need to rely on Jacoby Brissett to be throwing the ball so much. You've got that 2-headed running back duo there. I think they could put up some yardage and stuff in this one. I mean, that's really all they have to do to win this game. And I just don't think that the Steelers defensive front there is going to be able to stop Chubb and Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. And their linebackers did not tackle well last week. It's a high number. I get that, 5.5. And you know what? If I saw how the Steelers did last week, but I think there was a lot of problems that were exposed in that game. And it also, to me, it's Trubisky. And I can't believe I'm going to say that I trust Jacoby Brissett in any situation, but I trust that system in Cleveland a little bit more in this one. So I am going to take I'm hesitant to do this, but I'm going to take the Browns laying 5.5 to win and cover this one. And probably what's going to be, I'd say something along the lines of like, oh God, I think this is going to be an ugly one. I think something along the lines of like 20-13. And I think the discussion of Kenny Pickett is going to be up there at the end of this game. I think the marriage of Mitch Trubisky is starting to wear thin here. I mean, even in week 1, when the Steelers won 23-20, Trubisky didn't throw any interceptions, but he was not stellar either. That was really the defense of the Steelers that did something. And I know Minka Fitzpatrick did all right, but I think TJ Watt not being there now is starting to really factor in. And I think the Browns also realized that, you know what, they can still put up some points and be competitive. I know they had just collapsed down the stretch there, but I'm going to take the Browns laying 5.5. Do you think the Steelers are going to win upset, or you think they're going to at least keep it very, very close?
No, they're going to keep it very close. I don't think they're going to win.
Okay, so I'm going to take the Browns laying 5.5. You're going to take the Steelers getting the points. So we kick off week number 3. And again, full Football Friday picks this upcoming Friday as we try and rebound here on Game On. So that's it for the football. Really, there's one college note that I would bring up before we transition to the NBA. The Appalachian State, what they did against Troy. Now, that whole day on Saturday with College Game Day being at Appalachian State there in Boone, North Carolina, and then going out there and beating Troy the way they did on that Hail Mary. And the Hail Mary was so incredible. I don't know if you saw it, Hank, but App State's down 28-26, and they have to throw a Hail Mary because there's literally no time left. And the Hail Mary gets batted down at the 5-yard line and travels back 3 yards to a receiver who's able to turn around to the right and run in for the game-winning score. And, that's a special team there. App State's not that bad. They had very close games these first 3 weeks. They almost beat North Carolina. They scored 40 points in the fourth quarter against North Carolina, lost 63-61 late. But they've been all their games this year. It's a fun story, and there really wasn't much that you take out of college football last week, but Appalachian State's got to be the exception. From morning till nighttime, it was a very special day there in Boone, North Carolina. And, of course, folks, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, I will have a Monty moment on college football. Get you ready for week 4 in the season. We're already about a month in to college football, and it has just been remarkable how quick it goes by. But that's what it does. And fortunately, the news also came out, too. The College Football National Championship game has been moved up to 7:30 p.m. Eastern on that Monday. So it starts at 7:30. So for people like me who are up early every day, that's a benefit. So that's the other news you take out of it. But again, we'll do a full college football dive on my next Monty Moment, which will drop Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. All right, let's make a transition here. This story broke towards the end of our last episode, but there's definitely been a lot more that's come out of it in the past week, and that is with Robert Sarver. So the NBA did their investigation, and it broke during our show last week. They announced 1 year, $10 million fine, 1 year suspension, $10 million fine for Robert Sarver after what the investigation found there involving him. Now, some update stuff that's happened here over this past week. So you've had the NBPA executive director, Tamika Tremilio, say that she was speaking on behalf of NBA players, and she was calling for a lifetime ban of Robert Sarver, who was suspended for a year for his racist and misogynistic remarks. And so she said to ESPN's NBA Today with Malika Andrews, quote, "We are absolutely calling for that lifetime ban. We do not want him to be in a position where he is managing or engaging with individuals who are engaging with our players or the players themselves. We are absolutely clear from the findings that are in the report that we do not want him to be in that position." So you've seen now her come out with a statement. You've seen Chris Paul, LeBron James tweet their disappointment with the NBA's punishment of Sarver last week. So it's starting to go around several sources here. And again, like I spoke about last week, when this stuff initially came out, didn't really get a chance to read the full report. But my initial thought was, when I heard about this, was what is different between this and what happened with Donald Sterling? Now, Adam Silver said that they are not the same thing, but I disagree. I don't know how you don't compare the two. The Donald Sterling situation was one of Adam Silver's first things that he had to deal with when he became commissioner, and he set a bold precedent, and he went away from that precedent here with Sarver, and I don't get why that is.
Oh, he dropped the ball big time. No pun intended.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, to say that it's not the same as Donald Sterling, yes, it is. And not only is it the same, in fact, I would even argue it's worse, because not only do you have racism, but you have misogynism. And This is a guy who owns a team with a lot of players who are black, and he owns a WNBA team. So how he's even still allowed to like have ownership of the team and with that whole slap on the wrist, it makes literally no sense to me whatsoever. I think the NBA PA guy is absolutely in the right for wanting him banned, and the fact that you're having him lose a sponsor to own a team, I think that really says it all. And look, let's be real, this isn't going to be the last sponsor that drops the Phoenix Suns.
Well, that's that's a good way to transition into the next
part.
It's
going to reach a point where they're going to be forced to kick him out.
Well, that's actually a good way to transition to the next thing I was going to talk about, and that's PayPal saying that it will not continue its sponsorship if Robert Sarver returns after the ban. And that's really, in this day and age, that's where you start really getting to these guys. It's not the 1 year and the $10 million fine. Look, the $10 million fine, that's the most that's the maximum that they're allowed to fine an owner under the CBA. But you start getting to the sponsorships and stuff, that's where it's going to start hurting. And I ultimately think if this continues to drag out and you do see more stuff, that Sarver is going to be forced out. Now, whether he resigns or whether they force him out, we'll have to see. But I agree with you 100%, Hank. The NBA completely threw up an airball in this regard. Adam Silver, really, that was one of his first moments as commissioner, and really he made a bold statement at the start. And he set a very good precedent with the Donald Sterling situation, banning him for life. I don't get why this is any different. I mean, he can come out there and tell me they're not the same. I mean, let's be honest. After this was released, Sarver came out and said the punishment was too harsh. I mean, dude, did you see what they found in there? And they only gave you a year. Anybody else in the NBA, if that was any other position, GM, head coach, assistant coach, player, they're getting a lifetime ban. I mean, come on. Nobody else is surviving this. And once they start getting into the sponsorships and stuff, that's where it's going to start affecting you. And yeah. People are forgetting that Sarver's wife was making threats also. But yeah, so I think there's going to be more to this. I don't think this is going to be the last. And if this stuff continues to leak and just drag out, then there will be. But I also don't know if you want to be going. I think you don't think you want to be going into the regular season and thinking about something like this. So the Silver and the NBA had a chance here, and I don't think they did a good job. That's for sure. And look, your own players now are coming out and saying you didn't do a good job with this. I mean, that's all you need to know. LeBron James and Chris Paul are two of the, biggest vocal guys in the NBA on stuff, no matter what. And it's a big deal. And, the NBA and the Players Association are supposed to be meeting coming up to talk about the CBA because it technically does run out at the end of this upcoming season. And we could be on a collision course here with the NBA running into some problems too. They the last couple of years, they've run into some situations that have been problematic. So it's something to watch here as the season, because it looked like when Silver first took over, the NBA was on top of everything, and they are running into some problems here on the court and off the court too. And I think one of the things, and Hank, we had spoken about this very early on in Game On, was all these load management and rest days. And I would predict that coming into the next CBA, one of the things you're going to see too is you're going to see a shorter schedule throughout the season. Because this whole play-in tournament is a bunch of baloney. This 82-game season is way too long because you have a lot of guys that are sitting out. They're barely playing the full season. But this just adds on to it, and I think the NBA now is going to start heading down a road that's going to be very, very ugly here.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see it. 82 games. It definitely makes sense. It's a lot of games, and yeah, I don't think they want their star players getting hurt in meaningless games, so would agree.
So back to the PayPal thing for a second here. The PayPal deal with the Suns was worth $3 million during the 2021-2022 season. And we will find out what happens with there. But this sponsorship deal with the Suns began in 2018 and did include the Mercury, and a Spanish soccer team, and they're all owned by Sarver, and that's set to expire at the 2022-2023 season. So again, you start adding sponsors into the mix. I mean, we've seen when sponsorships go away in no matter what field, whether it's TV, sports, anything, that's when it starts hurting. It's just the reality of the world right now. So keep an eye on this, see if more stuff comes out. And I'll be honest with you, I would not be surprised if we're still looking at a longer thing down the road here, because I just don't know how he's going to be welcomed back after a year. This was, I mean, the findings in this report, again, I just don't get how the Donald Sterling thing is differs from this. I think I agree with you. It's even worse. But Silver had a chance here to keep that precedent going, and he failed to do so. So we'll find out. But training camps open up soon. Regular season almost here. Same thing like in hockey. So we'll keep an eye on that and see what happens. But Hank, let's keep it on the major sports here. Let's get to some baseball. We are coming down the stretch here of the baseball regular season, and our postseason picture is starting to shape out here a little bit. You had the Mets on Monday night clinch a postseason spot for the first time since 2016 after their win against the Milwaukee Brewers. This comes on the heels of the Dodgers clinching the NL West, the Houston Astros clinching the AL West. So both of those teams will receive first-round byes in the division series. But keeping it here with the Mets for a second, Hank, because really great story, to what's been a tremendous season so far. But now you come down the stretch here these next couple of weeks. You saw them celebrate a little bit in the locker room on Monday night, but I like the fact that they really didn't go full tilt, and Buck Showalter had said that too, because you still got to deal with the Atlanta Braves here for this division. And I think if you were the Mets, it is critical that you win this NL East, to avoid playing in the wild card round so you can line up your pitching staff, because I will continue to maintain this. And I know the Mets have had a little bit of a rough stretch here, and I think the best thing that's happened to them is the fact that the Braves have not been, as much as they've been on their heels, the Braves had a chance here to actually overtake the Mets and actually put a little bit of distance.
Right.
They were not able to do so.
And they couldn't beat the Giants.
Well, they couldn't beat the Giants. They had that terrible loss in Seattle after they scored 5 in the top of the ninth, and the Mariners scored 6 in the bottom half to win. And I think, though, it is critical for the Mets here to win this NL East, to avoid the wild card situation, to make sure they can line up their pitching staff, because let's say we get a Mets-Dodgers NLCS, for instance. Yeah. If the Mets could line up Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer in games 1 and 2, the Mets have a chance here. And I think that's what's going to be very, very important here for the Mets, is to win this division and to get their pitching staff lined up in a way where they could get those two guys the most. Now, Taijuan Walker's had some moments this year that have been good. You've had some that have been bad. He had his last start against the Pirates, 7 1/3 innings, a couple of runs. So he wasn't that bad. But, he's also had moments where he can't get out of the first inning. So very important to line up those top 2 guys if you can to be healthy. But
I would say the same is also true for Chris Bassett. He's another pitcher that's good when he's on. He had 8 strikeouts in his start over the weekend. I believe it was the Saturday game.
Yep.
Where the Mets beat the Pirates. That was the day that Eduardo Escobar hit the 3-run home run. So, yeah, after the top 2, that's where it kind of gets dicey.
Yeah, I agree with you. But, you have seen some moments there, too. I think the offense has the potential to do just enough. They're not going to overpower you. They're going to, gap to gap you. They're not built like other teams that are made. But also at the same time, I'm not in love really with the Dodgers pitching staff here, because, they've dealt with some injury woes. I know Clayton Kershaw pitched very well the other day, but, their pitching's not automatic either, especially in the rotation with, Tyler Anderson, Andrew Heaney. Kershaw, you hope that he's healthy. We don't know what shape Tony Gonsolin's going to be heading into the playoffs. So Dodgers, even though they're putting up numbers this year that are absolutely remarkable. I mean, if I give you what they've done this year, it would be incredible. But I think that's the key. That's why I think if we have a collision course here of the Mets and Dodgers in the NLCS, I give the Mets a very, very good chance, because they have the recipe. I know the Dodgers lineup's better, but I don't love their pitching staff. And that bullpen also scares me a little bit too.
Yeah, that series would be a pretty crazy one to see. And hey, could be the third time in the last 16 years that they play the Dodgers. But obviously, the Mets have to handle their own part of the schedule as well. They still have 2 games left against the Milwaukee Brewers. And after that, I believe they go to Oakland for a few games. So for them to have a West Coast flight there before that critical final series against the Atlanta Braves, that's not ideal, even though the Oakland A's are like among the worst teams in baseball. In fact, I've been on record calling them the Triple A's numerous times.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the Mets are, Mets need to have a really good stretch within the last 2 weeks of the season. But we do have, let's tip our caps to them, because look, this is now their 10th playoff appearance in their 60-year history. So anytime something like that happens for the Mets, their fan base is going to get a little excited. But if you ask like a wide majority of them, I don't think they're resting on this. I think they're more focused on getting that division, which they should, because you really don't want to have to burn DeGrom and Scherzer in a wild card series against, say it's probably going to be the Phillies or the Padres that they would play if they don't win the division. Maybe the Brewers too, but the Brewers are kind of falling out of it a bit. I don't think that's going to be the case, but both of those teams have some decent lineups. I mean, frankly, if I were a Met fan, I'd be more worried about the Phillies, because I mean, the Padres, while they have you still have Josh Bell and Juan Soto. I don't care how poorly he may have been for the Padres. He's still going to generate a lot of fear in that lineup, as well as Manny Machado. I think the Phillies are the team that would scare me the most, because look, I don't care that the Mets dominated them in the regular season. That is a team that has weapons in their lineup, and that is a team that can make adjustments after having dealt with the Mets enough during the regular season. So, really, when you think about it, a lot is really at stake for them. And, let's go back to the Dodgers for a bit. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think the Dodgers, while it seems like they're the team to beat for the National League, I mean, they already have 102 wins under their belt this season and could very well get to a crazy win total. The chances of them winning the World Series isn't necessarily a sure thing either, because, as we mentioned, pitching staff, while it's been good, you're getting production out of Tyler Anderson and Tony Gonsolin and Urias. You also don't know what you're going to get out of Clayton Kershaw, or if you're even going to get a healthy Clayton Kershaw. And I still think the Walker Buehler loss could be even bigger than people realize, because I've said numerous times, this is somebody who has pitched under the bright lights, and you would want him in big games. And then we get to the bullpen, and that's where it really gets dicey, because Craig Kimbrell has lost. On the rare times that the Dodgers have lost, it's been because of their bullpen and Craig Kimbrell.
I mean, it's crazy to think I trust Edwin Diaz more than I trust Kimbrell.
Oh yeah,
right.
I mean, granted, the Mets bullpen, the bridge to get to Diaz is kind of but
that is the thing. Yeah, I mean, that would be something I'm concerned about if I'm the Mets. But I think what I do is I stick David Peterson in there, and either as a lefty or I get him as a couple of innings to try and get me there. That's what I would look to. That's what
who else could be a good option for them to get into the bullpen? Tyler Miguel. He just got off the IL.
Well, it looks like that's what they're going to do with him. Is they're going to put him as a reliever in for the rest of the season. Drew Smith also, when he comes back, is going to be used as a reliever too. Because, I mean, I don't know really if DeGrom and Scherzer are going to be worked up all that much to go that deep in the games. Now, I know that DeGrom finally crossed the 100-pitch mark. Scherzer just came back from his second stint on the injured list this year. So you are going to need guys to get there. Now, of course, the biggest weakness with every team in baseball is middle relief. That's why, but that rotation, I think, is so good. I mean, unless they all flounder, which they have not done this year. That's why the Mets have not had a long losing streak. They've had stretches where they've lost 4 out of 6, 5 out of 8, but not 5 in a row. But Yeah, it's just going to be crucial. I think the Mets and the Braves, Hank, are going down to the last week of the season for this division because those two teams are that good. The Braves just don't go away. I know Albie's just got hurt again, but I mean, the Braves are just loaded up. I mean, the Braves are better offensively. Pitching staff is all right. I mean, I love Spencer Strider, what he's done this year, but to me, the Mets have a pitching advantage, but the Braves are a better rounded offense than them. But we'll see what would prevail. But I think we're going down to the last week of the season, which is going to be exciting here for this division, which now means so much more. By the way, just to talk about the Dodgers real quick, here's a crazy fact about the Dodgers. So they're playing at about a 700 clip this year. They're 58 games over 500. The Royals have won 58 games all season. The Tigers have won 56. The Pirates 55. The A's 53. The Nationals 51. And the Dodgers are 58 games over 500. I mean, that's absolutely wild. And then you also see the Houston Astros, no surprise, clinch the AL West as well, as we'll see if the Yankees make a collision course here.
I have something to say about the Astros, too. I forgot to mention. So
yeah, go ahead.
The Astros getting number one look like they have an easy path to the World Series, which on paper would make sense. But if that wild card round comes down to a series between the Blue Jays and the Mariners, I think that would be a worst case scenario for the Houston Astros, because look at the lineup and look at the pitching that the Blue Jays have. I think the Blue Jays are equipped to really surprise people and make a dangerous run. And I've also been on record saying that the Seattle Mariners are the biggest sleeper team, at least as far as the AL goes.
I totally
in my opinion. Like pitching staff, you've got Castillo, you got Logan Gilbert, you got Robbie Ray. Like, if you lose one game to them, then you have to face like one of those other pitchers in that rotation. So that could be a key threat too. And that's a team that's going to be playing with nothing to lose. It's their first year in the playoffs. Now, granted, you could also use experience on the side of the Houston Astros, but that could go both ways because, look, it's a relatively young Seattle Mariners team. You've got Julio Rodriguez pretty much being the guy that's injected a lot of youth and a lot of life into the Mariners, and somebody you haven't really seen do that for them since like Ken Griffey Jr. So yeah. I would say that that's a team that if they're playing with nothing to lose and you don't see them like act all nervous, I think that's a team that will be in relatively good shape come October. So again, just like I said with the Mets and the Phillies, if God forbid for the Mets' sake that happens, then if the Astros have to play the Mariners in that division series, throw the records in the regular season out the window, because if you're an Astros fan, I would be nervous about that. And the same would be true for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That is actually the cool thing to watch in the American League is that wild card chase between the Rays, the Blue Jays, and the Mariners for sure. Yankees real quick. I think they're gonna win the AL East. I think, but the key for them really right now is just to get healthy, because it's tough to figure them out right now. I mean, they had some moments against Milwaukee. They had a bad loss one of those games, but really when you look at the Yanks, it comes down to two things. Number one, health. Rizzo's back. Hopefully LeMahieu's coming back soon. But this team's got to get fully healthy, really, for me to think that they're going to make a deep run here, because really what all these injuries have done, and I think this just speaks to how awesome Aaron Judge has been, is kind of feel like you're taking Judge's bat out, which is why I actually like the fact that they've been putting Judge in the leadoff spot, because you're not going to intentionally walk Judge leading off in either the top or the bottom half of the first. So I love that. And that's really the other thing you're going to be watching here with the Yankees the rest of the season. There's going to be two things to watch here with baseball besides the division races and the wild card races down the stretch here. There's going to be two things. Number one, Aaron Judge, can he break Roger Maris's AL home run record in these final couple of weeks? I think he's going to, because he has been on such a hot tear as of late. I mean, he's making a run even for the Triple Crown this year in the American League. He's been that remarkable. You could possibly have two Triple Crowns in baseball this year with Judge and Paul Goldschmidt over there with the Cardinals. And number two, speaking of the Cardinals, Albert Pujols. Can he get to 700 home runs? That's going to be something to watch too. He's at 698 right now. Judge is 2 home runs shy of 61, and Pujols 2 home runs shy of 700. those are going to be the two things to watch from an individual perspective here, Hank, as we come down the stretch here of the season.
Yeah, and I wish they were things that we were talking about more in the sports world, but I think we know who we have to blame. And
well, I was trying to go the whole show without talking about him. I know Yankee fans are not going to be happy to find out that the Yankees, there he is, he's still there, because the whole thing with this. But Hank, I think you speak to something here though, because it's funny because on social media, I think Fox Sports' MLB account put up the other day, is Paul Goldschmidt's NL Triple Crown race getting enough attention? And I'm like, well, no, I don't think. I think that speaks to a major problem that baseball's having, and that's promoting what's been going on here. I mean, look at it. Look at it our end here. So we spent the first hour of the show talking about week 2 of the NFL season, because that's what happens here, because the NFL markets itself better. You're coming down the stretch here of the baseball season, and you still have some races, you have some individual feats, and it doesn't take the top story right now. And the story now about the Yankees, who still have to play an Apple TV game, they still got some Amazon games, and that they're going to keep to that when you've got possibly Aaron Judge breaking the AL home run record here. I think, again, speaks to a major problem baseball's dealing with here. But
yeah,
Rob, I tried to give you a week off, but then things come up that make us think about the lockout. And again, the worst is yet to come.
And he has no one to blame but himself for this.
Absolutely. Although the lockout, I would blame every party in that.
Well, yeah, no, I agree.
It starts with him, though, but I would blame everybody as far as the lockout goes. But he does not help the cause at all. That's for sure. But yeah, so good old Rob Manfred. You thought we can go a whole week without talking about you? Nope. All right. A couple more things here real quick before we get out of here. Let's get a little tennis involved. We haven't talked a lot of tennis here on the show, but you've got 2 retirements in recent months. Serena Williams retired after the U.S. Open, and she made a great run there. A great story. But this also broke on social media this week about Roger Federer. So the 20-time Grand Slam champion took to social media to announce that he's going to retire now. Originally looked like the LeVar Cup was going to be his final attempt. Now it's possible that may not be the case. But nevertheless, if you're a tennis fan, and I know our own Nick Morganson is, and I'm sure he's going to get a lot into this on Empty the Bench coming up tomorrow. But when you look at it here, Hank, these are two greats here with Serena and now with Roger Federer retiring here. And I think this is going to leave a pretty big void and hole in the world of tennis.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not a hardcore tennis fan, but I agree. I think those are two guys that those are two people who left such an enormous legacy on the sport, and you're not going to see players like them for a long time. I think this is absolutely a big deal, and hats off to them for great careers. And, as I said, they're pretty much almost certain for the Hall of Fame. And I think why I say almost certain, and we can blame Pete Rose for that.
Yeah. But I would say the thing I think about, the first thing besides all the winning and all the success that Federer has had is the longevity. He's 41. I didn't even realize he was this old until I was looking him up the other day. He's 41. He's played tennis for over 24 years. And you just don't see that in the world of tennis. I always remember these stories of players retiring in their early 30s. And here's Federer, who's been going strong here. Now, I know the last couple of years, he's been plagued by injuries and surgeries, and that's what he actually had said in his social media post that came out last week about the fact that especially the last 3 years, he's had injuries and surgeries. He's been working hard to get into full competitive form. But, tennis takes your toll because you need a lot of stuff. And a lot of the things with tennis now is you've got a lot of young players and stuff that are playing. We saw that at the U.S. Open over there in Flushing a couple of weeks ago. But, yeah, there's no doubt that, Federer leaves an impact on the sport. I mean, really the only other guys right now that I think that you even could put on the same level as Federer right now are Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic. And we'll see how long Federer decides to go here. There was talks about the Lever Cup being his final event. Now, possibly that may not be the case. And he said he's still going to continue to play tennis, just not at a competitive or high form. But yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, he's got 20 career Grand Slams, which the only people that have more right now are Nadal and Djokovic. And you saw the post from Nadal on social media about it. But this Lever Cup, which is going to take place in London, takes place from the 23rd to the 25th of September, and it was named after Australian great Rod Laver, who's this is a 3-day team event, which is run by Federer's management company and pits six of Europe's top players against 6 from the rest of the world. I thought this was interesting too. So Tony Godsick, who's Federer's agent since 2005, told the Associated Press that Federer had been having issues in his latest recovery from knee surgery. So I guess that could also have been it too. But, playing at a competitive level for 24 years in any sport, and I know we're going to get to one in just a few minutes here, but it's truly remarkable. But yeah, no, Federer, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I only watch the majors when it comes to tennis. I mean, I'm into the U.S. Open because it's in Flushing. I mean, I'll watch Wimbledon, I'll watch the French Open, I'll watch the Australian, but even though those usually happen overnight here in the East Coast. But yeah, no, Federer, I mean, when he was out there, was as dominant as there was in the sport. I mean, he 103, just a couple more numbers here about Federer: 103 tour level titles, 1,251 wins in singles matches, which are both second only to Jimmy Connors in the Open era. His records include being the oldest number one in the ATP ranking histories, including being at the top spot at age 36 in 2018. Again, when you're talking about a lot of tennis players that retire in their early 30s, here he is at 36 and still being the top player in the world. Pretty remarkable. Made 10 consecutive Grand Slam finals, winning 8 from 2005 to 07, and also 18 out of 19, which ran into 2010. I mean, just the numbers, when you look at all this, is just, I mean, it's mind-blowing because, I mean, I know Nadal is great. I know Djokovic is great, but even them don't put up the kind of consistency and dominance that Federer did. So, right. And then now you factor in with on the women's side with Serena retiring. I mean, these are people that, you grew up, even if you weren't the biggest tennis fan, like I know, Hank, you aren't, and I'm not really either, but you know about these names. I mean, you watch the sports show highlights, shows, you hear about them, especially in the major tournaments. So I think this is going to leave a huge void on tennis because I don't really know who that next up-and-coming star is. Now, again, you go watch Empty the Bench tomorrow, and Nick's going to be on, and he'll tell you because he's more of a tennis guy than we are. But, I mean, these are two names that even if you weren't the biggest tennis fan, you knew about. So I think it'll definitely leave a void, but it is, congratulations on an incredible career to both Federer and Serena Williams, who are, they'll still be around. They're just going to be transitioning to a new era of life here as far as that goes. But speaking of retirements, Hank, this broke Tuesday morning. You have 3 hockey players that are announced that they're going to be retiring, that announced their retirement this week. So Zdeno Chara, let's see if I get PK Subban, and Keith Yandle all announced their retirement on Tuesday. And, we're big hockey fans, and we all know those names. So Zdeno Chara, pretty remarkable because he was in the league for 25 years.
This will be the first year of my lifetime that Zdeno Chara isn't playing, fun fact.
Yeah, and, Chara, I always think about big, tall guy out there defensively. He was veteran presence out there. But, Hank, those 3 names that Subban, you always think about as that pesky enforcer out
wasn't
there.
A fan, but I wasn't a fan of his game, but as a person, he was amazing.
Absolutely. You know what? I always think of Subban like a different version of Sean Avery when he was with the Rangers. That's always the guy I thought of. And Keith Yandle, who we knew about as a Ranger briefly too. I mean, he announced his retirement too. So 3 retirements all in one day. But yeah, pretty remarkable careers for all 3.
Absolutely. Zdeno Chara, he was an absolutely brute force on the ice. 25 years, most of his prime, of course, coming with the Boston Bruins, who I would assume will eventually retire his number into the rafters at TD Garden. And fun fact, he actually started his career and ended it with the same team, that being the New York Islanders, who in probably one of the worst trades in NHL history. Mike Milbury sent him and a draft pick that turned into Jason Spezza to the Ottawa Senators. And I think that was the Alexei Yashin deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
that was a pretty bad trade. And then you also had Keith Yandle, who was a really good power play quarterback. I liked him when he was a Ranger. Granted, it wasn't for a long amount of time. He was a deadline acquisition made by Glenn Sather, one of his last trades he made as general manager. And he was a good player in almost getting the Rangers to the back to the Cup Finals in 2015. But unfortunately, despite being one of the higher scorers on our defense the year afterward, that was just kind of a down year for the Rangers. And because of all the contracts that they had for Henrik Lundqvist, Dan Girardi, and Mark Stahl, there was no way they were going to be able to keep Keith Yandle. So they ended up having to let him go. And he kind of bounced around at the end. He played a good amount of time with Florida and then with Philadelphia at the end. But most of his time, I remember, was him doing well with the now the Arizona Coyotes, in his prime. And I do remember his brief amount of time with the New York Rangers, of course. So definitely a good career. And I don't know if he will be in the hall like Zdeno Chara, but definitely one of the more successful careers by a defenseman. And then PK Subban, this is a guy I have mixed opinions about. He was another player who, in my opinion, was one of the best offensive defensemen during his prime. And quite honestly, I think you can make the case that he was one of the best Montreal Canadiens of the 21st century. I think the only player you could really put ahead of him is maybe Carey Price, but he was a good name that brought the Habs back to relevance, helped them get to 2 conference finals in 2010 and 2014. And look, I was not the biggest fan of this guy also, though, because he had a habit of, diving a good amount of times, and then sometimes he would slew foot players. Unfortunately, I was at the Garden when he knocked out Sammy Blais for the rest of the season. But I do have a funny story about that game. I actually, on my way out at the Garden, I stayed a good amount to try to see which Rangers would be there to try to get autographs. It's not something I do all the time, but I do it occasionally just for the hell of it. And then as I was walking down, the stairway that's has the street that's in between MSG and Penn Station, I see a dude in a fur coat and a fancy looking hat, and he's as a bodyguard because of the head. And it turns out it's PK. And I'm like, hey, PK, what's good? And he's like, he was actually pretty friendly, believe it or not. So that was pretty funny.
You know what? I get it. I get that vibe from him because I've seen him on ESPN, this last playoff run, being an analyst, and he comes across as a great guy as an analyst.
Yeah. So he's great. And
usually those enforcers are like that
too.
Yeah. And usually those enforcers and stuff when they're off the ice end up being very, very nice guys. They just like to be those enforcing guys on the ice. Yeah. So that's the thing I take from it. Of course, with Chara, real quick, let me just go back to him for a second. I mean, of course, I think about the 2012 All-Star competition when he had 108.8 mile per hour shot in the fastest shot. That still holds the all-time record, by the way. And he did sign a one-day contract with the Boston Bruins to retire.
Makes sense. That was where he spent his best years.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, all 3 guys that this era you would definitely know about announced their retirement. So congratulations on a great career to all 3 of them all around. And since we're talking hockey here and we're a few weeks away from the start of the season, I had to bring up this Ranger trade that happened I think it was on Monday. Hank, why don't you take it away here? Because I know you had some thoughts about it.
Yeah, the Rangers traded defenseman Nils Lundqvist, not to be confused with a certain Swedish goalie who wore number 30, to the Dallas Stars for a top 10 protected first-round pick for next year and a future 4th-round pick, which could become a 3rd-round pick depending on his point production with the Dallas Stars. But I don't really want to get too much into the technicalities of it. And actually, I should also mention that 1st-round pick that's top 10 protected, if Dallas doesn't finish in the top 10 in the draft lottery, then that 1st-round pick becomes a 1st-round pick in 2024. And let's talk a little bit about the saga with Nils Lundqvist. Like during the offseason, or not during the offseason, I think it was reported as far back as January, he wanted out from the New York Rangers. And the reason being, he's a right-handed defenseman. And if you look at the roster, you already have Adam Fox, who's not going anywhere anytime soon. You have Jacob Trouba, who you've just named as your captain and probably won't be going away until maybe within a year or two after his contract. And then you had Braden Schneider, who emerged as one of your more irreplaceable defensemen over the course of the season and was a key member of that team that made it to the conference finals. His path was to the NHL, or with the Rangers, was essentially blocked. So you could understand why he went up to the front office, demanded a trade, and he even went as far as saying he wouldn't even report to camp unless he was out of the Rangers. Now, how he handled that is really another matter entirely. But as far as the trade goes, this is a win for the Rangers, because look at how many draft picks the Rangers have next year. Chris Drury will have 7 draft picks in total. And, if that first round pick becomes a thing, he'll have 2 first round picks next year. And, he now leaves him with a lot of options. Those draft picks could essentially be used to fill what could be a missing piece on the Rangers roster that, puts them one step further. And, and as I said, even if Nils Lundqvist ends up doing well with the Dallas Stars, let's face it, I don't think you're going to get the production that he could potentially get in Dallas. And this is a guy who fancies himself as like an offensive defenseman. I don't think you're going to get that production with him out of the New York Rangers. And, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is, like, you have a lot of young guys in the minors, whether it be for the OHL or with Hartford. Not everyone's going to get a chance to play. That's just the reality of the situation. And, the Rangers did what they had to do. And while I personally would have preferred to get, like, say, a center, unfortunately, given the situation of him wanting to trade, that just wasn't going to be realistic. So all things considered, I think Chris Drury has done a great job. And he has continued to prove that he has done a great job, like, making trades to lift the Rangers. And I've been saying that with Chris Drury pretty much since the past offseason. So the lesson from this is give Drury the benefit of the doubt.
Totally agree. I don't think there's anything more I could add on to that. I think you nailed all of it. I do totally agree with that. And you know what? Mm-hmm. Training camps are opening up there in hockey. The regular season is only a few weeks away. And I think this was a nice little way, to incorporate pretty much everything into the course of the conversation here. We all 4 major sports, tennis. I mean, it's just getting started. And then we now have, of course, the NFL Week 3 starting. This is going to be a blast. And I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, should definitely be a very, very exciting upcoming season here for the Rangers. And of course, we'll give them a lot of talk and a lot of love, and hopefully they have another very successful season this upcoming year. But folks, that just about puts a wrap on the show here for this week. Of course, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB Network to find out when all of our Game On content, as well as all of our shows here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, will air. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Game On ETB on Facebook and Twitter, and Instagram GameOn_ETB, and our personal handles there on the bottom of your screen. So, of course, just a couple of quick notes, as you guys know by now. Thursday, we will have our next Monty moment as we look ahead to this upcoming weekend in college football. Hank and I will come back on Friday for our Football Friday picks against the spread and some interesting matchups, including Giants and Cowboys, to wrap up week number 3. I'm looking forward to that and so much more. So for Hank Indictor, I am Johnny Montalbano. I'll see you on Thursday. Hank and I will see you again on Friday, and then right back here for Game On episode 27 next week.